Okay, guys, welcome AP World History students. This is your Unit 1 Foundational Period Historical Review. Essentially, from 2.6 million years ago up to about 10,000 BCE, Paleolithic era. Here you'll see we'll get up a little bit beyond that, perhaps even to 600 CE, but we really won't get too much depth there at the end. Okay. All right. With nomads, our first people were they traveled around in nomadic groups during what we call the Paleolithic Age, the Old Stone Age. These were going to, be in small groups, anywhere from several tens of thousands of years ago up until something called the Neolithic Revolution. So make sure you know that. Our first groups, small groups, they were foragers, they were hunters and gatherers. This led to more egalitarian societies where women were equal with the men, which was this is something that you'll see is not the norm for the next 10,000 years, essentially. But women brought as much food or more food to the tribe than the men did. The men who were out hunting weren't always successful. And everything was shared in these hunter-gatherer societies. There were no social classes, no distinctions such as that. You're talking about small bands of 25 to 75 people, sort of like a Native American society, if you want to kind of visualize something where you get a lot of communal property and things like that. That's about to change, though. But pastoral societies, where a little bit different with them is that their focus is around animals, as you see, that cows and horses and goats and sheep and things like that. The milk, the hides that are used by these animals. Some of them, such as the Aryans, would even count their wealth based on how many animals they possessed. Now, this is where it starts getting interesting. When we get the Neolithic Revolution, which is sometimes called the Agricultural Revolution, and we think that was began by women, an accidental thing where they figured out that it was the seeds that were causing food to grow. And so, they began growing it themselves. They've basically taken something that they found in the wild and they've tamed it and they've domesticated these plants, if you will. And this leads to civilization. This leads to the advancement of cities, people congregating in one place. You get specialization where people are working in one craft, whereas in the forager and hunter-gatherer societies, everything was kind of based around food. Well, now you don't have to worry about that problem so much. And it frees people up to, go in different directions and create different things. The human brain becomes a wonderful thing here. It also leads to our river dynasties, which we're going to talk about a little bit more coming up soon. Now, with the agricultural revolution, of course, the acquirement of land becomes the main necessity here. More food equals more people. And you're going to start seeing warfare in that people are fighting over land because land is so incredibly valued, so incredibly important to life after the Neolithic Revolution. Now, food surpluses leads to specialization. You'll only have a portion of your population who's responsible for farming, and this will open up, time for the rest of us to do things like weaving rugs and creating vases and becoming professional soldiers and many other occupations. It also leads people to have time to think. We see a lot of inventions because of the Neolithic Revolution, including the wheel and the taming of fire and, of course, the sail. Some very important innovations in this time period. Now, there's a huge impact of the Neolithic Revolution on the environment. One of the first farming techniques used in the time period was slash and burn farming, where simply they'd go out and they'd cut down these trees, they'd burn them and scatter their ashes, and that would help fertilize their fields. It wasn't a very efficient way of farming, and eventually they would have to move to new lands and do the process over again. But basically, humans are altering the environment, willfully altering the environment in a way that animals never could. Without a doubt. Now, also because of the Neolithic Revolution and this time and the specialization and people getting to sit around and think, you start seeing the advancement of metallurgy, which is to work in metal. Basically, what you're going to get, the first is bronze. We get the Bronze Age, which is going to replace the Stone Age, where you're using basically stone and wooden tools. Bronze tools are going to be far superior, of course, but bronze is fairly rare, and so it is pretty pricey. So you will see that bronze will stay for the most part in the hands of the wealthy. But that's okay. It's going to get replaced soon when iron comes into being, basically when they discover iron ore and how to work it. And iron is much more plentiful, and it's a much better metal than bronze. And it begins the Iron Age, which is a big game changer, especially in military and trade. Okay, so thanks to the Neolithic Revolution, we see basically the beginnings of these river dynasties. And there's going to be a couple of them that we'll talk about. We'll talk about Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China will be our four big ones. Now, Mesopotamia is the oldest that we've found. Even though it is in the Middle East and it is some dry areas, there is still plenty of water. Mesopotamia grew up between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, so in between these two rivers, gave life to the civilization here. With Mesopotamia, means the land between two rivers in Greek. The most important of the Mesopotamians early on was Sumer. They were the first major Mesopotamian civilization, and what they brought us was the first written language, at least that we found, called cuneiform. Initially used for business transactions, but eventually would give us epics such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we'd be reading for entertainment and not just business. They were a pretty advanced people living in these city-states, Mesopotamian city-states. Sumer was a city-state itself, 10, 20, 30, even 40,000 people. All of these ancient civilizations, for the most part, were polytheistic, meaning that they believed in many gods and goddesses, not a monotheistic god. The ziggurats were incredibly important to all the Mesopotamians, including the Sumerians and the Babylonians and the Akkadians and many of the others in the time period. And ziggurats were basically, they showed the power of the city. It was where the bureaucrats were, where the scribes were, the ones who knew how to read and write. It was basically the functioning center of the city. Incredibly important. Now, you're going to get several different groups that begin taking over the entire Mesopotamian area. And it's not really the Babylonians first, although they're one of the most famous, but it was these guys, the Akkadians, who first did it. Sargon of Akkad was known as the first empire builder, basically where he took his city-state and he conquered the next city-state, and then he conquered the next city-state. And, pretty soon he's conquered a larger area of Mesopotamia, and he has brought them under his rule, meaning that they're going to deliver him taxes and offer him men for fighting when he calls on them, which kind of the nature of an empire. Now, the Babylonians come in after the Akkadians, and they become a little bit bigger, a little bit better. A lot of theirs is because of the Code of Hammurabi and wise and powerful rulers such as Hammurabi. With the Code of Hammurabi, there's some important things here. It's the first written down law system, and it gives some very specific punishments for crimes and deeds. When you read through some of them, you'll notice that they are unequal, that poor people are punished a little bit more harshly for the same infraction than rich people are. But it does show you that people are protected. Women are protected. Maybe they're not as powerful or equal as men are in this time period, but it does show protections for them. There are divorce rights. There are some property things that they can get, although just really not on the level of the men at this time. Now, the Hittites are a group that come out of Central Asia, bordering along Mesopotamia there, and they're a new breed. They have domesticated the horse. They're an Indo-European group, and horses were domesticated first in Central Asia, and they make good use of them. They use them in warfare to use chariots. Looks like I'm going to go ahead and it looks like stop right here. I'll have to do two parts here. Okay. So we'll stop here with the Hittites and their invasion of Mesopotamia and them wreaking havoc and bringing their iron, very important iron technology into Mesopotamia. Okay. Thank you.